Welcome back to the Hardware Unbox podcast for episode 89. Today, we're going to be largely talking about Valve's new Steam machine. Some people are calling this the Gabe Cube because it kind of looks like a GameCube, but is a new console-like PC device. We're going to be looking at the specifications, some of the limitations around SteamOS, and just discussing about how viable we think this product is in the current PC gaming / console gaming landscape. Also, a few other topics that we get to, some AMD Roadmaps and Steve's interesting camera story in the Boring Life section. So yeah, let's get into it. We're going to dive straight into the main topic for this week's podcast first up, because some people are interested in our thoughts on the Steam machine. For those who are not aware, who haven't seen the news already, Valve is making a new version of the Steam machine that is designed to use SteamOS this time around. The Steam machine, they did attempt to do this sort of home console version that would run Steam games a while ago, but I think it relied largely on partner devices running Windows. It was kind of clunky and didn't really go anywhere. They're bringing it back with a new device called the Steam Machine again. This version, as I said, runs SteamOS. It's sort of an small cube device that's sort of designed to look like a home console, very similar to the consoles from like the Xbox and PlayStation, that sort of thing. But of course, it runs your Steam games instead. And it's interesting because obviously, first of all, runs SteamOS with, instead of Windows, but also it's got some unusual specifications is probably the best way of putting it. And so I'm going to go through some of these things, and I'm interested in your thoughts, Steve, on some of the things that they are putting into this particular device, which they claim is also a PC that you can install whatever operating system you want on. So first up, the CPU that's being used here, they describe as a semi-custom AMD Zen 4 6-core 12-thread processor up to 4.8 gigahertz, but with only a 30-watt TDP. So the thinking here is that this is probably an APU that they're using from their mobile device. So not a Ryzen CPU that you would see with the chiplet design on the desktop, but an APU probably with the GPU fused off and just using the CPU cores. So I guess, first of all, CPU side of things, is that going to be any good?
I guess it depends on what your sort of bar for any good is, because compared to like the handheld stuff, it'll be much more powerful, but compared to your desktop processor, not very powerful. But it's a compact, low-powered thing. And it's really hard to discuss a lot of this stuff without actually knowing the price of the thing, because that really gives you context for all of this. But it's going to be slow. I imagine games like Space Marine 2, stuff like that, will probably be played at very low frame rates. I wouldn't imagine that would be too much above 30 FPS. I think 60 FPS could be a stretch there. But, we'd have to test it all out and see how that works. But it does seem like in those obviously more CPU demanding games, you'll probably be more CPU limited, even given the fact that, the GPU is quite weak as well. I think the CPU performance there will be fairly problematic.
Yeah, and there's a couple of ways that this could go as well, depending on the sort of APU that they're using, because AMD does have two different configurations that they can deploy for these sort of APU products. And again, we don't know for sure, but we are assuming that with a 30-watt TDP, that it's probably going to be one of these APUs that's repurposed for this. They do have an 8-core die that just uses 8 regular Zen 4 cores. So to get to a 6-core configuration, that would mean 2 of the cores fused off and obviously the GPU disabled as well. Alternatively, they also have one with 2 Zen 4 cores and 4 Zen 4C cores, which would get us to the 6-core 12-thread total that they are quoting here. But that would potentially give even worse performance. So you'd be probably hoping that that's not the option that they've gone with, but they certainly do sell that as a product. The Ryzen 5 8450U, for example, uses that configuration with a TDP of up to 30 watts. So that's kind of like the entryest of entry-level configurations there. But then obviously with the GPU as well, they're saying this is semi-custom AMD RDNA 3 with 28 compute units, 2.45 gigahertz max sustained clock with a 110 watt TDP. So that's basically a cut down version of the RX 7600. The 7600 had 32 compute units from memory with, I think, was it similar or slightly higher TDP, something like that. So this will be effectively an RX 7600 that's worse. So somewhere slower than that, which obviously doesn't hold up great today. You've probably done some more recent testing of things like the RX 7600 in games like Battlefield 6, for example, and Borderlands. How does that sort of GPU fare these days?
Well, I don't have any exact numbers for you off the top of my head, but it was an underwhelming GPU upon release, and that was quite a few years ago now. So it's very much, I don't know what, it's not even entry level really. It's extremely slow GPU, only 8 GB of VRAM. Similar to the RTX 4060, which is also a very slow GPU. It'll play stuff like Fortnite, Counter-Strike, Valorant, obviously, because using the performance type settings, anything will really play those games. But I can't remember what frame rate I got in Battlefield, for example, but it would have been low. I could probably look it up quickly for you if you want to know. But yeah, the performance there isn't great. I know they're quoting like a 4K 60 FPS experience with this, with FSR. And I think that's a bold claim given the specifications that we're aware of. Maybe with the lowest possible quality settings, with like the performance, ultra performance mode of FSR, then that might do it in your AAA titles. Indie games, yeah, sure. I've got the higher quality settings at 1080p, and it did 67 FPS at native 1080p. So it was one of the absolute slowest GPUs I tested. It was only slightly faster than an RX 6600. Slower than RTX 3060.
Yeah, I mean, with the 4K 60 FPS stuff, the console manufacturers, I don't know whether we're counting this as a PC device or a console device. It's closer to like a PlayStation. But Sony, for example, has always claimed things like 4K 60 FPS, 8K gaming from their consoles. And, it's not a native 4K system, and it certainly doesn't really do 8K gaming, the PlayStations. But they use that because, as you mentioned, like an indie game would have absolutely no issues, especially if you're talking about your basic sort of 2D games, that would have no issues running at 4K 60 FPS on basically anything. And so they can claim it in that sense. But if you're talking about, like the latest and greatest games, I think people would be interested in playing, especially things that you might play on a PlayStation, for example. This does appear to be a 1080p medium settings configuration at best. There will be some situations where that CPU performance is probably going to cripple it a little bit, and the GPU might as well in some situations. But also, the fact that they're claiming 4K 60 FPS with FSR, of course, because this is an RDNA 3 GPU at the moment, that they would be referring to FSR 3.1, which is, not the greatest quality. And especially if you're using this on a 1080p screen or aiming for 1080p gaming, because the specs indicate that's what it would be for, that's not going to give you very good image quality. FSR falls apart really at 1080p, like those old versions fall apart at 1080p. And while it's fine on something like a Steam Deck where the screen is small, low resolution, and you're sort of accepting of the fact that it's a low power system that really can't do high quality graphics, on a TV that you'd be hooking something like this up to, or a monitor, the limitations of FSR 3 would really be obvious. In which case, you'd probably want to be thinking about native gaming, in which case, then again, it falls back to this sort of 1080p medium to low settings configuration. I mean, maybe you'd be hoping that AMD would release the Int 8 version of FSR 4 for this system. I think it would be pretty essential for this. But yeah, the way things currently are, where we don't really know whether that's going to be available for people to use, this is not going to be an overly powerful system. And I guess, the current, limitations of getting RDNA 4 into this sort of system, pricing, that sort of thing, has meant that they've had to go with an older architecture. But yeah, like this isn't going to be a PlayStation 5 competitor in any performance sense, I wouldn't have thought. It's probably going to be slower than something like that for your modern games, especially considering PlayStation games are optimized for the PlayStation. These are just running your regular PC titles on SteamOS. But obviously the big topic that I think a lot of people are going to be interested in your thoughts on is the fact that it comes with 8 gigabytes of VRAM. So they're launching a new console in 2026 that has just 8 gigabytes of GDDR6 VRAM. And because we're looking at a discrete CPU and a discrete GPUs, this is not an APU where everything is integrated together into the one package and benefits from unified memory. Because they're discrete, you've got 16 gigabytes of DDR5 memory plus a separate 8 gigabytes of GDDR6. So it's not 24 gigabytes of unified memory for everything to use. This is very much an 8 gigabyte VRAM configuration, which will have all the limitations of 8 gigabyte gaming. So, what are your thoughts on Valve going with 8 gigabytes for a 2026 console?
Well, as I said earlier, the price really does shape my opinion on this one. I can't say it's outrageous and it's terrible, it's this and that, because those comments have always been price dependent. So, for example, bringing it back to the stuff we normally cover, if AMD or Nvidia released a $200 US GPU, in the current market with 8 gigabytes of VRAM and it had reasonable performance, and we'd be like, yeah, look, it's a heavily compromised product, but considering it's half the price of other models, then, not too bad. If they release an 8 gigabyte card at $300, $350, $400, that's obviously very bad. And, you've seen how those reviews play out. So the price really does dictate how much of our hammering they get for 8 gigabytes of VRAM. Obviously, we don't want to see any GPUs, discrete GPUs, current generation stuff with 8 gigabytes of VRAM. But that's out of our control, let's say, Tim. So for this thing, I think it's pretty well established at this point. It's going to be released next year. So it's not even a product that you can buy right now. It's going to be, it's already, in my opinion, outdated at the time of announcement. So at the time you can purchase it, very outdated hardware. You would have to be going into this thing. You're buying a very low end. I'm even hesitant to say entry level because there's something needs to be below the entry. I don't know how that makes sense, but there needs to be for this because it's just that low end. You're not like medium for your AAA, your latest AAA titles. That's going to be a tall order, I think. It's really a low quality, lowest preset gaming machine for those type of games. Not necessarily the indie games, of course, but that's a different thing altogether.
Yeah, I mean, this is a system, like, you wouldn't really be building a PC today that has these specifications. Like, if you were going out and trying to build a budget PC, you would almost certainly end up with performance that's better than this. And I mean, yeah, like, you could go out and buy used GPUs and very, very low-end stuff, and maybe it'd be in the ballpark of this. But certainly if you were thinking about, okay, I'm building an entry-level budget gaming PC and I want it to be sensible, you would almost certainly end up with more CPU performance. I think the 30-watt TDP and the APU configuration is going to limit that part quite a bit. And then obviously today's modern GPUs, you can't really get this GPU configuration anymore. I mean, I'm not sure whether, like, we sort of have looked and seen like RX 6600s and stuff are sort of available, but it's not really something that's advertised for gamers today. And of course, like, the price comes into this, of course, because this entry system that I'm talking about is probably not going to be, like a $500 system. Like, once you're adding in the CPU and all the, especially with DRAM prices at the moment, adding in all those components, it's going to be more expensive. But this is a below entry level PC configuration if you were building a PC today.
Yeah, it's an old used PC level of performance, like a previous generation.
Yeah.
A previous generation entry level configuration.
Yeah, this would have been entry level in 2022 whenever RDNA 3 was released. Like, that was the entry level GPU configuration. So yeah, it's like if you had upgraded to a newer platform, you had your old RX 7600 system laying around and you gave it to a friend. Like, that's kind of the performance that you'd be looking at.
Yeah, I don't want to take it back there right away, but the way to achieve this level of performance by spending a lot of money on new hardware would be to buy something like Strix Halo. And we've obviously talked about the APU stuff a lot. Not saying, this is an APU. You've already said discrete GPU, discrete CPU. I'm not sure have they mentioned, like, I'm working under the assumption that there's no upgrade path for this particular system. So, like, it wouldn't be a socketed CPU, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think if it's a mobile part, which I think is the assumption, I think Digital Foundry's actually had hands-on time with the system. And while they didn't get like the exact APU specs, they're also saying that it's quite likely to be an APU, like a mobile APU. So that would be a soldered part, obviously. The GPU is like it's not going to be a discrete replaceable GPU. Again, we're probably looking at a mobile packaging because I think AMD attempted to sell that RDNA 3 GPU Navi 33 as a mobile part, the RX 7600M. So the RX 7600M is the 28 compute unit configuration. So it's probably that.
So
the only thing you'd maybe be able to upgrade is the memory if they're using SODIMM memory, for example.
Yeah,
but not the VRAM, of course, just the DDR5 component.
Yep. So I imagine in a sense you really can treat this like an APU type system because it has all the same limitations. Like, it's low powered, but it's also low performance, doesn't really have an upgrade path, all that sort of stuff. All the same drawbacks that you would get from buying a product like Strix Halo. Of course, the price, we still don't know. Linus gave a little bit of a hint towards that when he quizzed them on, what the price might be. And they basically said it's going to be more like a desktop PC price rather than a console price. And that is really bad news. Of course, they're probably not talking about high-end desktop PC, but if they're talking about desktop PC, they must be talking about an entry-level desktop PC. And again, don't want to keep bringing it back to the APU thing, but if this is priced anywhere near what you can build an entry-level gaming PC for, then it's going to be, in my opinion, dead on arrival, because that entry-level PC you would be buying would have a significantly more powerful CPU. It would have a significantly more powerful GPU, both of which could be upgraded independently. You would be able to have more system memory. You'd certainly be able to put a GPU in there with more VRAM. So you'd be getting better image quality, better performance, and the ability to upgrade it, which we've talked about at length as to how much value that adds. It's worth spending like 20, 30, 40% more on a system to get that. And there'll be people who'll be like, oh, but I can't afford that. You privileged YouTubers, blah, 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 whatever. But that doesn't take away from the fact that, first of all, we don't know what the price is, but the only indications we have is that the price is going to be higher than you want. So I know there are going to be people that will react negatively, let's say, to our seemingly negative feedback on this product without having actually tested it yet, just going off what we know and how we understand it, because they're wanting it to be a thing that saves PC gaming for them. They can finally afford a computer that can play all the games and allow them to enjoy gaming, which is ultimately what we want for you. But we're not going to say that's a thing if it's probably not going to be a thing. And from where I'm sitting, I don't really see how this product actually is the Steam Machine. I don't see a path for success with this one. The handhelds, the success there make perfect sense to me. And when people talk about how we don't understand APUs and they point to the handhelds, it's like, well, we're talking about desktop replacements. And then the Steam Machine ends up in desktop replacement territory, but it doesn't sound like it's going to be a viable desktop replacement. So again, this is just me, digesting the information we have. Could be completely wrong, maybe great success. But with the information that I have available at this point in time, I do not see how this product ends up being a success, because it's too much like a desktop and really not enough like a console. And the advantages of a console it doesn't really have. And then the advantages of the desktop it doesn't really have. So it has the disadvantages of a console while trying to be a desktop. I just don't see how that's going to be a recipe for success.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. And I think, obviously we're making some assumptions on the price there, because I think that this can be a successful product if it is priced like a console.
Yeah.
Like, I think at the moment, I'm not 100% familiar with the exact price that you're paying for like a PlayStation 5, for example. So I believe it launched at $400 for the digital version. I'm not sure what it's at now. I think there's been price hikes, but let's just say it's still a $400 machine, maybe $400 to $500. Based on what I'm seeing here from the Steam Machine and the specs, it would have to be cheaper than that. So if I'm tossing up, let's say I have $500 to spend on a gaming system, would I buy a PlayStation 5 or would I buy a Steam machine? I'm probably going to buy a PlayStation 5. I think it's more likely, based on the specifications, to deliver higher image quality in your AAA titles because of, I think it is probably a more powerful system in general, but also it has the optimization of console games. You can generally get a little bit more out of it on the sort of, the system that Sony has made. So it'd have to be cheaper than that, maybe like Xbox Series S level territory, which is sort of your entry level $300 system. I mean, if they can sell this for $300,
Hmm.
you're not really building a PC for that amount of money.
No.
So it becomes like a reasonably viable product from that sense. But the other issue that they face is game compatibility, which we've talked about with SteamOS and Linux-based gaming previously, which is that, it's great that you can run the majority of Steam titles on the Steam machine and also on products like the Steam Deck. That's great. But when you buy a PlayStation 5, you can play all the multiplayer titles that require anti-cheat technology. So there's no issues playing Battlefield 6, for example, on the PlayStation 5, Fortnite on the PlayStation 5. This machine will not be capable of playing those titles unless there's some change between now and the release of this where they solve the anti-cheat issues. Maybe they work with the developers to get anti-cheat working on SteamOS. As things currently stand, those type of games will not work. So for someone buying this system and they're looking at which way do I go with my limited amount of money, if you're at all interested in the multiplayer side of gaming, and even if you wanted to do maybe, mostly single player, but you might want to try out like a game like Battlefield 6 when it comes out, you'd be far better off buying a PlayStation or Xbox to play those sorts of games on it.
Mm-hmm.
Because they'd be guaranteed to work, whereas, as I said, it would not be guaranteed on this system. And so that's a problem that, again, it sort of limits the price, because if you're building that, PC equivalent that you were talking about, where just from a hardware sense, it makes sense generally to try get an upgrade path and better performance. It also makes sense from a game compatibility standpoint. So if it comes down to the Steam machine costs about the same as similar specs on a PC. Like, let's say you could build two systems that were exactly the same price,
Mm-hmm.
one and exactly the same performance. One was the Steam machine and one was the desktop PC that you've built. Same everything. You would
Mm-hmm.
still buy the PC, not just for the upgrade path, but also the game compatibility angle.
Mm-hmm.
And so that means that this system has to be cheaper than that. And so I don't really see a way where this is successful priced anywhere really above $400 US. $500, especially because that would be like the entry level 512 gig configuration, which is probably going to be pretty storage limited. I mean, you're talking about like $500. Would you spend $500 on that or just buy like a PlayStation? Like
Sure.
those are the sorts
Yeah.
of things that a mainstream gamer would be looking at. Again, like, I'm not discounting this as a niche product, because some people would say like, I've got a huge Steam library and I just want a compact system that I can plug into my TV, play my Steam library with SteamOS, the Steam interface, which these days is quite good. So I wouldn't buy a PlayStation because I own no PlayStation games, but I own 100 Steam games. But that still makes it a very niche product, something that is sort of like an existing PC gamer that has all these Steam games and stuff. So yeah, it's difficult. But then again, like, if I was going to say like what price is this system going to have, I cannot see it being $400. Like, I think that's far below what they'll actually price it at. I would imagine $500, $600 at the absolute minimum,
Mm-hmm.
which again, as we sort of said, makes it not that viable.
Mm-hmm.
So I certainly agree with you on that. I think, I've seen some comments sort of blowing up the VRAM as an issue. I don't think it's, for the performance that this system has, like, it'd be ideal to be able to run ultra textures and those sorts of things. But one of the things we've always brought up in the VRAM testing is the performance of those GPUs is able to run games with ultra settings at 1440p or higher resolutions, for example. And if you set the ultra settings, but then it doesn't work on the 8 gig card, but does work on the 16 gig card just fine, that is kind of a problem. But when you're talking about entry level hardware, you're probably not in a situation where you're just going to the ultra settings straight away. Like, that might happen and people might be like, oh, what's going on with my performance? Why is this so bad? It might be VRAM related. But I think the reality is that people on this sort of system will just be using your medium to low sort of settings.
Not a huge issue. It's a bit of a bummer in the sense that even if you set, say, a low preset, jacking the texture quality right up can really improve the visuals of the game. And, that's something you could do if you had 16 gigabytes or even 12. But in a lot of games now, that's becoming a problem. And, it's a developing problem. So in a year, 2 years from now, if you buy a Steam machine next year, and then you're a couple of years down the track, you haven't had it for very long. You've quite literally had it for a couple of years. There's going to be a lot of games that are going to start to become really problematic, even with the medium preset at 1080p, and you're certainly not going to be able to jack the texture quality setting up. And again, that's a really good way of improving the visuals in a game. So the fact that you can't do that, and then just to sort of recap the game compatibility thing, it's a real shame that because the convenience of something that, the convenience that a Steam machine could offer would be great for, sort of, I know, more casual gaming with a game like Valorant, which doesn't really go hand in hand, but there are casual gamers that play Fortnite and Call of Duty Warzone and Valorant. And another game that won't work is like League of Legends, but something that Valorant, League of Legends, Warzone, and Fortnite all have in common is that they're very easy to run, especially when using the more competitive type visual quality things. I mean, League of Legends, you can run that on anything except for the Steam machine, ironically. And the fact that you could play that game on there well and enjoy it, but you can't, is unfortunate.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a bit of a disconnect for this system because the game compatibility is going to mean that it's largely indie titles and AAA games, single player sort of things that it supports.
Mm-hmm.
But then all of the games that this would be best designed for are not compatible. So, like if this was designed for, say, the top 10 games on Steam, that would be fantastic because a lot of those are the sort of things that you were talking about, your lightweight games that really run quite well on a wide range of hardware, but then they're not going to run because of the compatibility issues. But then this system will be able to play games like Cyberpunk 2077. So, it's not going to run that game well, but that game will be compatible on this system. And so there's going to be that problem where, the hardware specifications aren't necessarily going to allow you to play the games that are compatible on it. And that's where things like even an Xbox Series S, sort of like your entry-level console, it's also not going to be able to run, your AAA titles at the best visual quality on that system because a lot of them run at like 1080p and have frame rate issues and things like that. But it does run things like Fortnite quite well. Like you can play Fortnite easily on an Xbox Series S. You can play Battlefield on there. It runs all those sorts of games. So that's going to be a weird one for people, I think, with this system. And people sort of said things like this is an Xbox replacement because Microsoft's making questionable decisions with the Xbox thing. It doesn't seem like that to me. I don't really see people choosing, like a casual console buyer, choosing this over an Xbox for the sort of compatibility reasons that I've said. Of course, it all hinges on things like the price and stuff like that. But like it is very much an entry-level sort of system, and it'll be very interesting to see where they price it. I think just on the pricing as well, there's one other thing that I wanted to touch on, which is the price of DRAM at the moment. I'm, as I mentioned on the Hardware Unboxed Twitter, I'm hope that Valve has got a great contract price for the memory components that they're using in this system, because 16 gigabytes of DDR5 in 2026 is not going to be cheap. Even though it's an entry-level configuration today, the chips are not going to be affordable in any sense. So that could make up a significant portion of the BOM price. So the bill of materials for this product would go to things like the DDR5 memory and GDDR6 VRAM. So that's one potential reason why we haven't gotten a price yet, is because they're not sure what they're actually going to be able to price it at due to the use of things like DDR5. And one of the disadvantages of going with the non-unified memory is that right now, at least based on the sort of things that we can look at, DDR5 is much more expensive than GDDR memory of any kind. So if this used, let's say, 16 or 24 gigabytes of unified GDDR6 memory, that would actually cost them less right now than if they use 16 gig of DDR5 plus the 8 gig of GDDR6, and it would perform better. But the fact that they've gone with this split means that they're now facing these DDR5, supply and pricing issues. And people sort of say things like, they're Valve, they get contract prices, they're not paying consumer DDR5 prices, so surely they're getting these things for cheap. But we're not just seeing consumer DRAM at places like Newegg go up in price. We're seeing, contract price for the chips themselves that go onto the DRAM sticks that you buy at Newegg. Those prices have gone up significantly. And so if it ends up that 16 gigabytes of DRAM is making up over $100 of the BOM cost of this system, then you're looking at adding in maybe another $50 for the VRAM, maybe, another, I don't know how much the GPU and CPU dies are going to cost, but they're going to cost some amount of money as well. And you can quickly add it up to see how the prices that we're targeting or thinking about may not actually be realistic for this product, especially if, they wouldn't want to have a situation where they launch the product at, say, $400, then DRAM prices go so crazy that they have to raise the price very soon after. I mean, they might do that. Maybe they'll launch the 512 gig model with an attractive price, then discontinue it once DRAM becomes unaffordable. But yeah, like it's like not a great time to be launching a system like this unless they've got some sort of great contract price in for this memory. But if they are using something like SODIMM memory as opposed to buying the chips and soldering it onto the board, then potentially when they were thinking about making this system, they were just thinking about, okay, well, as we're building these systems, we're just going to go to one of the memory manufacturers like Samsung or Crucial, one of those that makes a lot of SODIMM memory, and just buying them as they make the systems at a normal price instead of, contracting in to buy SODIMM memory for like a year or 2 years after the fact. But that isn't really viable these days with the way that, you really do need that contract locked in well ahead of time. So that's going to be something that'll be interesting to sort of watch over time is the look on DRAM and how it would affect something like this. So yeah, I mean, interesting times for a lot of PC gaming on that side of things. But yeah, the Steam machine. The final topic I want to talk about relating to this is SteamOS. Obviously, they're making more of a push into this, actually putting it into a desktop system now, or a desktop-like system, as opposed to the handhelds that it's used previously. Should Microsoft be worried about Valve going down this path and sort of making more of a play into desktop gaming with this system? I mean, you've said that it's potentially not a viable product, but should that side of things worry a company like Microsoft where, obviously desktop gaming is Windows dominant at the moment?
I would say any type of competition would be worrying, especially real competition. It's something they've been working on, they've improved, and there's definitely been improvements made over the years, and they're continuing to improve it. And a lot of people are unhappy with Windows and would jump ship immediately. We've talked about that multiple times on the podcast before. So yeah, how worried they should be, I don't know. How worried would they be? I have no idea. But I think the tide would turn very quickly on that one if, SteamOS became a viable operating system for gamers to use, and just, people in general, I think would jump over to it pretty quickly. But yeah, we've talked about the game compatibility issues being a bit of a deal breaker. Absolutely. Massive games like League of Legends and Fortnite and that not working at all is an ongoing problem.
Yeah, I mean, if I was in the position that Valve is in, and Valve is a private company, but all indications are that they're a very profitable company because they take like 30% of Steam sale revenue. That is one thing that I'd be investing a significant amount of money in.
Yeah.
If I was them, I'd be going to all the game developers, being like, let's figure out this anti-cheat thing. Let's get these major titles running on SteamOS. And obviously one of the issues as to why they haven't done it so far is because SteamOS is Linux-based. Linux is a very open operating system, and so they're worried about the inability to lock down the anti-cheat features on Linux in a way that they can do on Windows. So if they can solve that and invest a ton of money into doing so, I think that would pay off for them significantly in the long term. Because this whole situation with Windows, it reminds me a lot of how people were primed to move away from Intel in the era when they were just continually refreshing quad-core CPUs, and people were feeling, like AMD launched Ryzen at such a great time in Intel's product cycle because the lack of improvements, and also they were able to price out Intel, and then Intel had the struggles with the fabs for a while. And so people were like, okay, yeah, I'm sort of I'm not really getting what I need out of Intel at the moment, so I'm more primed than usual to jump over and try out an AMD system.
Mhm.
I think with the way Windows is, people are sort of primed for that as well. So a big investment to getting people interested in this system could pay off for them long term, because SteamOS is built around Steam. You can run other launchers on a SteamOS device, but it's not designed for that. So it's a little more challenging than just using the SteamOS. So building up this whole console PC like ecosystem around an operating system that basically is just designed to run Steam, I think would be great for them. And yeah, certainly would be something that gamers would be interested in if they can, get it running on their desktop PCs. So
Mhm.
that's what I'd be doing if I was Valve, putting in however many hundreds of millions of dollars of developer funds or whatever to get those sort of things solved. Next up, another thing that's happened since we last did the podcast is roadmaps. So, so for some reason, people love roadmaps. I've never been super interested in these announcements because I think they give us virtually no information whatsoever. But AMD recently had a financial analyst day where they have confirmed next generation architectures and roughly when those architectures will be coming. So Zen 6, they're saying this will be the industry's first 2 nanometer processor, Zen 6 and Zen 6C, supporting new AI stuff because everything's AI these days. They're suggesting that will be launching in 2026 with
Mhm.
Zen 7. They've also confirmed that for some future node next generation timeline at some point after 2026 with no real information. They've confirmed their GPU architecture roadmap by saying that there's wow, isn't this great information? A next generation GPU, unnamed, with next gen AI and ray tracing with no confirmed date.
Well, at least we know they're
So,
not giving up.
well, yeah, there's that. But yeah, like not tons of information. This obviously
Mhm.
generated a lot of news articles. We didn't make a video about it or anything because I think there's like no information here really. Um, but yeah, basically, it's looking like, as we've sort of expected for a while now, that Zen 6 server and desktop parts will be launching at some point in 2026 with mobile products potentially early 2027 for people interested in that. And then, yeah, like GPUs future. so, so there's that. Did you have any thoughts on AMD's roadmaps at all, or is this just the usual nothing sort of story?
Yeah, the usual nothing sort of story. I mean, we knew Zen 6 was coming next year. We're not exactly sure when it's coming next year. Could be like a Computex announcement. That would be sort of my hope, but not sure the time frame there, but probably sort of towards the mid to later part of the year, I would have thought. But yeah, again, 2026, like we've known that for a while now. So, and we know that Zen 7's a thing and it will come after 2026. So that's good to get
Wow, yeah, I know.
confirmation on that.
Yeah,
Uh,
isn't it great to learn about, the name of a future product that everyone would have been able to guess coming with absolutely no details. So yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, 2026 is going to be a bigger year for the PC hardware ecosystem. I think 2025 has been, obviously we've had a lot of launches towards the start of the year with new GPUs, but sort of this second half of the year, there's really been not all that much. Obviously, nothing has been happening really on the CPU side. The last interesting product was the Ryzen 9950X 3D, which came out, was it this year? It was early this year, I think, for the
um,
16 core version of X3D.
yeah, that sounds right. Let me quickly check. It
Yeah, so I think,
was, yeah, it was in March.
yeah, so between that and late 2026 or mid to late 2026, there's probably going to be nothing on the CPU front. We are expecting a couple of things in between now and then. Intel refreshing Arrow Lake CPUs. Again, we're not really expecting too much there, but they will be doing some sort of minor desktop refresh. And then there has been rumors of newer, sort of higher clocked or differently clocked versions of AMD's flagship processors. No idea whether those are true or whether they're going to be coming at any point. So there's those as well to look forward to. But most of the other announcements and releases, it's looking like will be sort of the second half of next year. Obviously, we've seen the RTX 50 Super Series stuff, which was originally supposed to be announced, at least as far as we know, sort of towards the start of next year, but that's up in the air, potentially because of DRAM prices and that sort of thing, as you would maybe seen from a video on Hardware Unboxed lately. But yeah, like not a hugely interesting time for PC hardware at the moment. You found something with motherboards that you might want to have a quick chat about.
Sure, I can. We finally got the AMD B850 motherboard roundup done and dusted. So that's out. I have had a few of the Sapphire like Nitro Plus boards come in since then. Not sure. I mean, I'll test them. I'm not sure when or how I'll get that data out because I'm not sure if it'll warrant an update video, but we'll work something out. Maybe I'll do like a buying guide and we can add that additional information there. So, because I know a lot of people are interested in that. So that's the B850 stuff. While I was testing B850 motherboards, I started to get a lot of the new updated or whatever you want to call it X870/X870E motherboards. Originally, I think we tested somewhere between 15 and 20, I want to say, for our original roundup. So it actually wasn't many motherboards. That was pretty well all of the boards that existed on the market at the time. MSI had, I think, 3 X870/X870E motherboards. It was a very odd situation. They invested heavily in Intel's platform. So a lot of Z890 motherboards, like a lot of Z890 motherboards from MSI. We've talked about how they get subsidized to do that and stuff by Intel, and this, they're incentivized in various different ways. Don't know why they thought that AM5 wasn't going to be something to invest in and that 1851 was. Anyway, that clearly didn't work out well for them. They made a zillion Z890 motherboards and they've probably sold 10 of them. So they've now pivoted mid-cycle and they're pumping out tons of X870 motherboards. So anyway, I've got like 4 new X870 motherboards from ASRock, half a dozen from Asus, half a dozen from Gigabyte, and probably close to a dozen from MSI. So that content will be coming up in about a month from now. But in the meantime, I've been testing. And I was testing the ASRock X870 Taichi Creator. So it's a non-E board. Quite a nice motherboard, testing all of that out. And I've decided, because I did this for the original roundup, I'm doing the USB testing just on the rear IO. So, I test all the individual ports. It's more just a validation thing, make sure they're capable of the performance they're claimed to be capable of and just how many high-speed ports they have and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, got the Creator, and it has quite a few USB 3.2 ports, the standard, 2 USB 4 ports. That's all good. The USB 4 ports performed as expected. And then I started testing the other ports, the Type A's, and, started working my way out the board, and I got to the top 4 ports, and they're colored blue on this board. And they're labeled on their website as Ultra USB Power, 4 Ultra USB Power ports. I don't know if they go into further detail about that. But when I plugged thumb drives and whatnot into these Ultra USB Power ports, they worked just fine. Now, for testing the bandwidth of all the ports, I have a Ugreen USB 4 enclosure with an NVMe 5 drive in it, so I can get 4 gigabytes per second of throughput. So I've used that for all the previous testing. I tested a lot of ports. I found one ASRock port, ironically from the previous testing, that didn't perform as it should and never really got to the bottom of that, unfortunately. Anyway, I've tested a few new MSI boards, Gigabyte, Asus boards, no dramas. Get to this ASRock board, and I plug it into one of these 4 ports, and it just doesn't detect the drive. No light, nothing, doesn't work. And what I found odd was, as soon as I plug that drive in and it doesn't work and I unplug it, those ports won't work with anything else. So they go from working with thumb drives to dead, but they're not permanently dead. If you shut the computer down, turn it off, and then boot it back into Windows, the thumb drives will work. But the moment you plug the Ugreen external hard drive SSD enclosure in, dead. And it won't work again until you completely power the system off. So it's like an overcurrent protection trip. Anyway, I couldn't work out if the board was defective, there's something wrong with it. So I recorded a video, sent it to ASRock because I was feeding them as much information as I could, but we weren't really getting to the bottom of it. So I made a video tutorial for them where I showed them the problem and walked them through it. Anyway, they basically got back to me, and I think reading between the lines, this is a bit of a whoopsie doopsie oversight type situation. But they sort of spun it as those 4 USB Type A ports are designed for high quality audio devices such as DACs and headsets.
Yeah, because I often plug in 4 DACs and headsets into my system at once because I just want so many audio devices in my system. That makes a lot of sense to me, yeah.
They go on to say to maintain clean and stable USB power delivery, these ports are equipped with a 12 volt to 5 volt converter. The converter output current is limited to 4.5 watts, which is the key takeaway there. So it's 5 volts at 0.9 amps, which gives you the 4.5 watts. And this complies with the USB standard. However, when using a Type-C M.2 external device through the Type A adapter, the current levels that are required reach like 11.48 amps. So the overcurrent protection kicks in, and that's why the ports stop working and you have to reset the computer. So they've said this, basically they've said they'll note, they'll clarify, it's a clarifying statement about these usage limitations for the 4 ports on their website. So I don't believe they've done that at this point in time. I can't see anything that sort of alludes to that issue. But I do find it quite humorous that they call these, what were they, ultra power? I'm trying to find that slide now. It's one of those websites where things just keep sliding across. So the ultra power ports are ultra limited in the amount of power. So maybe that's what they meant. They're ultra power limited.
Yeah, like I'm sure the power was referring to performance because they're probably, the higher speed ports. But yeah, it's just funny that power also does mean just, power. And so, yeah, to have it limited to, to get less than 5 watts out of a port is pretty low these days. Like, yeah, a lot of your external drives and stuff will require more than that. And obviously you've found that that drive works fine with other boards in their USB-A ports.
It works
and
fine
so it's just
sorry to interrupt you. It works fine with other USB Type A ports on this motherboard. It's just the 4 ultra power ports. The other Type A's are fine.
Yeah, I mean, they're reasoning with the whole 12 volt to 5 volt, converter and stuff. It basically just sounds like they used a crappy 12 volt to 5 volt, voltage converter, and that particular chip that they've used does not have a very high current output or current support. So that's just that. That's the situation there.
Yeah, so they're calling them clean 5 volt power USB. Like they specifically highlight these USB ports as being something special. They call it ultra USB power.
Weird.
So which these ensure significantly lower voltage drop under high system loads while maintaining interference from other devices or RGB lighting. The result, cleaner sound, more reliable peripheral performance, and peace of mind during critical recording, editing, and data transfer sessions. Well, it doesn't do too much data transfer, I've found.
Yeah, so they're basically claiming that the power output stability on the other ports is potentially affected by things like the load on the system and the power throughout the entire motherboard. So they've created those ports and they've used maybe a different power rail that used the 12 volt to 5 volt converter, and just so happens that that also has this limitation of it's more stable, but the power output is lower.
Yeah, they have added a disclaimer, and they've basically said if it exceeds 4.5 volts, it may trigger overcurrent protection, will require a system reboot to restore USB power. So that is on so this is a $320 US motherboard.
Yeah, pretty expensive.
Targeted as a creator board. Let me just confirm the price for you. But yeah, it's a high-end X870 motherboard. What annoys me more than anything on expensive premium motherboards is when you plug like something in, like a headset to charge on a USB port, and it's charging at 4.5 watts. That's painful. Yeah, $320 US for this board. I would like all of the USB ports on my expensive $320 US motherboard to deliver a good amount of power. And
otherwise, what are you paying for? Like, you may as well just buy it like a B850 motherboard. The X series stuff is meant to be for people that use a lot of peripherals. They're plugging in all these PCI and USB devices, and then to have them charge so slow is pretty frustrating.
Well, half of the USB 3.2 ports Type A's on that board only deliver 4.5 watts. So, and in fact, I think that's half of the 10 gigabits per second. No, that's more than half. There's only 2 other 10 gigabits per second ports on the board that are Type A's, and then you've got the USB 4 ports. So, there's 2 USB. There's a pair of USB 2.0 ports. Anyway, not great.
Yep.
I guess this is the takeaway on that one. So, yeah, that was a bit of an issue. I found that they weren't. It didn't seem like ASRock were aware of it. They weren't giving that warning or that disclaimer before I found that problem. And the reason why I don't think they were aware of the problem, and this is a design oversight, is the fact that it took them 3 days to confirm my findings and find out what the actual problem was. Because, if they were aware of this power limitation on those ports, they would have replied straight away saying, oh, there's a 4.5 watt power limitation on those ports. But we went multiple days of back and forth troubleshooting, and they were indicating that the board's probably defective and maybe we'll get it swapped out, and they'd like to get this board back so the team can work out what the problem is. And it wasn't until I made the video that they could work out exactly what was going on. They could acquire the necessary hardware and work out what the problem was. So it does seem like a design oversight, and they probably won't be creating updated boards with a 4.5 watt limit, especially on their premium high-end boards that have ultra USB power.
Yeah, weird one. It's one of those things where, there's the potential that other people have found issues like this, because it's, you buy a board, you plug in a USB device, suddenly it stops working. You think, oh, what's going on here? But there's like no information about it. It's just one of those frustrating issues that happens with PCs sometimes where, there's these unknown limitations or unknown flaws that mean that you can't use the products like you want. And USB things can be very, very frustrating to troubleshoot, where, especially these days where boards often have, there's the USB ports that are connected directly to the CPU via the chipset, but then sometimes they use, an additional USB chip to give you more USB ports. And I've certainly got on my display testing PC, for example, one of the tools that I use only works if it's through the direct chipset USB ports. If you use a motherboard with one of those additional USB chips, it almost certainly will not work. And so you always have to find the exact ports on the system that, give you the direct connection. Just very frustrating stuff like that, which depends on, the topology that they're not necessarily telling you about in the motherboard specs. So yeah, not surprised that you found something like that. Just one of those things, really.
Yeah, well, we find a lot of stuff like this, or I do when I'm testing these, 30, 40, 50 motherboard roundups. And that's why, one of the reasons why they take so long. Obviously, it's getting all the boards and all that sort of stuff as well. But in a way, I feel like we're doing like QA testing or something, because the amount of back and forth I do with these motherboard teams on BIOS related issues, memory compatibility issues, power limit issues, and with the B850 stuff, I went back and forth with Gigabyte a lot about the power limits. They were going to remove them, but them validating that process took forever. And basically, they've only done it now. So you can opt to remove the power limits on at least some of the boards that were hard limited when I tested them. But yeah, there's a whole lot of back and forth and trying to work out if the board that I have is defective, or if it's some sort of compatibility issue, or is it by design, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, a lot of fun testing motherboards. A lot of stuff a lot of work and behind the scenes stuff that doesn't actually make it into the final content, because it's now a solved problem. But it took weeks of back and forth on our end. But by the time you get the board or whatever, it's a solved problem. But this one won't be a solved problem. It's actually a design. Well, I see it as a design flaw. You can look at it however you want, but it's at the very least a design limitation.
Yeah, I mean, same stuff with monitors, really. There's always judgment calls about, like, you see the performance of a product, and you're sort of wondering, is that the intended performance, or is that a bug or issue, or just, whatever the case is. So, yeah, there's sometimes having to make some judgment about whether we do that back and forth over the course of weeks with companies to sort of figure out, is that the intended performance? And then you always get the issue where, if it is just the performance of the product, it's not necessarily a bug, it's just the way that it performs. Sometimes companies will, try and do the ring around on you with, wasting your time a little bit to sort of prevent you from, talking too much about that sort of thing. So yeah, that can be a pretty frustrating process with those sorts of things. And there's certainly products that I've currently tested that were going through that as well, the back and forth with companies to figure out some specific aspects and things like that. But yeah, ultimately we want, yeah, if we can help to solve problems with products, like we find an issue during the testing and they can release a firmware update or something like that to correct the problem or improve it, then that's a good outcome for people. But it just means that, sometimes we're doing a bit of the QA side of things that really the company should be doing. But, that's the life of a reviewer, really. Let's take a break. We'll come back and we'll talk about our boring lives. And we're back. That was a really refreshing and enjoyable break to talk about, the interesting things, well, not interesting things that have been going on in my life. One of the things I did was went to the tip recently. So that's how boring my life has been, really. Just had some leftover. When I built this studio that I'm currently, in the process of, still not 100% finished, I had to put up a lot of soundproofing panels because it was an empty room with a concrete floor. So it was very echoey. And so I built a lot of these sort of sound panels that are all around the place, which are just made out of some, I think it's canvas, and then behind it is just your wall insulation. So very basic sort of setup, timber frame, canvas. It's got the thing in there. They work really well, but I had, over time, I've been adding in shelves and things like that. And, you put things on shelves which do help to absorb sound and things like that, which has meant that I was amassing a pile of these things I didn't need anymore. But they don't really fit in my bin, so I had to go take it to the tip. That's how boring my life is. That's the sort of things that are happening. I've also been playing quite a lot of Battlefield 6 at the moment. So I've played probably around 60 or 70 hours at the moment. I'm up to about level 70 something in the game. So I've played a decent amount of it. It was good to see the recent patch addressing some of my frustrations with the game, some of the systems and mechanics and things that people were exploiting, in particular the drone sledgehammer thing, which if you've played Battlefield 6 previously, you could use a drone, hit the drone with a sledgehammer to access high areas of the game that you're not supposed to, which was mainly frustrating because people would use this and start sniping from the top of buildings and not actually doing any of the objective stuff. So if you had your own teammates doing that, they, generally speaking, were completely useless. And so you'd lose matches because they were using this exploit for no reason. And then if you're on the other team, it's just annoying because they'll snipe you occasionally. But yeah, I mean, I think this, now that I've sort of had a bit more time to get used to the maps and things like that, I think this is generally a pretty good game. I've seen some frustrations, some really hardcore players that are, massive Battlefield fans. I'm certainly a Battlefield fan, but I haven't necessarily played the old games for hundreds of hours. I usually tap out somewhere around 50 to 100 hours of most multiplayer games. It's sort of, I've seen and done enough of those sorts of games. But Battlefield 6 has been grabbing me more than I recall from things like Battlefield 5, Battlefield 1, those sorts of eras. Some of the maps are quite bad. The Cairo map in the city is really awful in the Conquest and Breakthrough modes that I generally play. But some of the larger maps are okay. And I don't necessarily mind the smaller city maps if they're interesting and enjoyable, because it does make it easier to get from objective to objective. So that can make the action a bit more exciting. But it does mean that things like the aerial combat and the vehicles as well are a bit more useless. But considering I don't usually play those, it's not a huge issue for me. But then I sort of very much understand the complaints of people that love to play in the tanks and the helicopters and jets that find those maps, annoying, or some of them you don't even get access to some of those vehicles, which is useless if you enjoy playing those things. So yeah, I certainly understand the want for people that, they want larger maps, more of that sort of combined infantry sort of thing. But I think it's just more, from my perspective, at least the way I play, if the smaller maps were better designed, I think people would generally be a bit more receptive to them, because some of them are fine. It's just that, the way it's sort of designed, is not great for some of those maps. My main frustration with the game more, though, and I think I talked about this last time I talked about Battlefield, is the stupidity of teammates. Some people are really bad at the game. I'm not saying I'm great, because I'm probably average at it, but some people, just really dumb. Things like you're about to lose the game and people just standing off the objective when you're about to lose. If they, as I said, you walk 5 meters forward, you could probably win. that I find quite annoying. People just running into fights and losing and not using the width of the maps and flanking and stuff like that is frustrating. So that's the real thing for me, which, skill-based matchmaking is not really a thing in Battlefield. So maybe if they implemented that, you would get, if you're a higher level, you would get more skilled teammates that might do those sorts of things. But then the downside is the games do become harder. So I sort of understand why they've done that sort of thing. It's just a thing about multiplayer games, right? Like sometimes you go and you're playing with just random people, and the people that you're left with are not particularly great at the game. So there's that. So yeah, outside of that, it's generally pretty fun. And sometimes you get on teams that are really excellent and, understand the game and the game modes and are doing all the things you need to do. Medics actually healing people and providing supply kits, and the engineers actually trying to take down the tanks and things like that, which is nice. So yeah, not sure how much more time I'll play Battlefield 6, but for now, I've been enjoying it, and I would recommend it if you enjoy that style of multiplayer game. Obviously, it's not this sort of Fortnite thing that you talk about, where it's more, the building mechanics and the ability to create cover wherever. With Battlefield, it's more this set cover, and I don't know. You've said Fortnite's quite a tactical game at times. I think Battlefield's quite tactical as well, which is the stuff I enjoy. But yeah, it's fun. I enjoy it.
Very good. Well, not too much excitement on my end. Been doing a little bit of construction work and stuff like that. I got all the fiber cement sheeting hung on my deck roof, and
Nice.
I've now been rendering that. So it's like a 15 meter by 7 meter area working above my head. So that's been fun. So my shoulders and neck are sore.
Yep.
So that's sort of the outdoor fun stuff. Another thing I did a little while ago now, because this has sort of been an ongoing story issue, I changed some cameras, security cameras, like outdoor cameras, just to monitor the property and stuff. Got quite a large property, so it's interesting to be able to like monitor that sort of stuff. So anyway, I had some Swan cameras originally, not very good, to be honest. The software, it was probably the biggest issue. The Windows-based software and the phone software, terrible. And the cameras themselves, not amazing quality. Had a few of them die, condensation issues, all that sort of stuff. So I did a little bit of research. This isn't anything super mission critical, just as I said, sort of surveillance type stuff. And my research led me to another sort of, I'd say, affordable option. A company called Reolink, which I'm sure many people are familiar with because they're kind of massive and do a lot of this stuff. And they're a global player. So anyway, I bought one of their kits and I've been very happy with it. So I don't really even know where to begin with this story. Tim's very up to speed with it, so I'm sort of telling the audience this one. So the kit I purchased it just had a code name. So it was RLK16820D8A. So I bought that because it had the specifications I wanted and everything. It's a 16 camera NVR, comes with 8 cameras. They're pretty high quality 8 megapixel cameras. They have like floodlights. They have two-way communication. They can play alarm sounds and all that sort of stuff. So that's pretty neat. That's a lot more features than what my Swan cameras had. So I'll get those. They were $1,300.
And the product code is relevant in this story. Reading out the product code is kind of boring, but it is relevant for what you're going to say.
Yes. So, yeah, like I said, I've done a bit of research. This kit seemed like good value. It was only 1,370 Australian dollars, which is really good for like the quality of hardware you get. And in particular, the Reolink software is excellent. So their phone app and their Windows software is excellent, significantly better than Swan's. Swan's was garbage. So anyway, I got this kit. I replaced all the Swan cameras in like an hour, set up the NVR, got it all working, was extremely impressed with the whole process and how well all the hardware worked. And yeah, had it up and running for a week or two, no dramas, everything was good. It didn't skip a beat. So that's all good. I then wanted, I think it's one of one of the motorized cameras. I forget the terminology for that, so I'm not a security camera expert. But anyway, it's like 18 times optical zoom. Very impressive. I bought that to add to the system, plus I think like 3 other specialized cameras, and they've been running for many months now. Really good. Can't speak highly enough of those. So anyway, rewind a bit. A week after I bought this thing, because like I said, I've got a large property. I have a shed that's quite far away from the house, but it has internet. And I thought, oh, it might be interesting to buy another one, or useful to buy another one of these kits and just stick it down there. And I could have some cameras to like watch the wildlife in the backyard and stuff. This is not like high-end security stuff. It's more just, this would be nice for nature watching and seeing what goes on around the shed at night. And I was really, really, like I said, impressed with the first kit I got. So as it so happened, I'm browsing the internet and a Reolynx RLK16 820 D8A kit comes up on sale through Reolink. I'm like, wow, that's convenient, because I was toying with the idea of buying one of those. It was only $170 cheaper, but that's pretty good saving if you're going to buy another one, right? So $1,200. I thought, yeah, I'm going to buy that. So I buy it. I didn't think too much. I thought the product page looked a little bit different, but I verified it was a genuine, like it was reolink.com. It was the genuine website. It was all the genuine process. So I purchased it, and the kit rocked up a week later, pretty similar to how the first one went. But as I'm unboxing it, and I love the unbox experience here at Harbour Unboxed, I'm unboxing it and I'm like, I swear these cameras look a little bit different. Anyway, and then I get the NVR box. I'm like, I think that looks roughly the same, but possibly a little bit different. There's like different USB port placement and stuff. Anyway, I went and got one of the other cameras, and sure enough, they're significantly different. So the second kit I bought had much smaller cameras. So the original cameras were the P334, and the newer cameras were P335. And bigger number better normally, except not in this case. The P335 was a considerable downgrade from the P334, sorry. So the camera itself was physically smaller, didn't have like the big bright floodlights. I'm not sure if it had the two-way communication. I haven't exactly looked into all of that, but it was physically smaller, much smaller lens on the camera. The camera lens was smaller. And yeah, the image quality isn't quite as good because of that. So anyway, I'm like, what's going on here? Did I screw up? Like, what have I done wrong? So I go back and I check the product listing, and it's the RLK16, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay. And I go and check the first one, same product code. I'm like, oh, okay, so this one has to have like a V2 at the end or something. Like I've missed something, right? So I've checked the email, I've checked the order form, I've checked the website, and it's exactly the same. And couldn't really work out what was going on there. So I contacted their support and said, I've purchased a second, I explained the whole thing. Like, here's my order number from the first one. Here's my order number for the additional cameras I bought. I'm happy with all of those. Here's my third order number. And for some reason, I've got a different product. Anyway, 2 weeks goes by. I hear nothing. No reply on the support email, nothing. I fill out the support form on their website. After a week, I hear nothing. I'm like, well, this is just great. So I've got the cameras sitting there, don't really know what to do with them. I haven't exactly worked out what's going on at this point in time, because believe it or not, this isn't a super high priority for me. As I said, I just bought these cameras to whack down the shed. They weren't like a mission critical vital thing. Busy with work. This is a low priority issue. I reach out on X and I DM them. So just a private direct message and say, does support at reolink.com work? Because like no one's giving me support and I would like a little bit of support. A week goes by and they actually reply on X saying, what can we help you with? And I'm not going to bother with that. It was crazy. Like, I ended up having a private video conference call with their social media team to try and like work out what was going on here, which was turned out to be a massive waste of time. And their solution was to just offer me a refund. So, I could ship the product back at my own expense. So I've paid to ship the item to my house and I have to pay to ship it back to them. So I've essentially paid shipment twice on this thing and, I'm not going to get the product I wanted. So I'm like, well, that's not really a solution. Like, I'm almost happy to pay to ship it back if you send me the correct item. then I will have only paid one additional shipping charge to get what you advertised. And I said to him, I said, why has this product got the same name? Like, what's going on here? And the best they could give me was, oh, someone's made a mistake and like there's a mix up with the names. I'm like, okay, but how is that my fault? Like, why am I having to pay to ship this back? You guys sent me the wrong thing. And what I couldn't work out was the expensive, like the better kit that I got the first time, was that the mistake? And was I always meant to get the second kit? Or is the second kit the mistake and I was meant to get the first kit again? So that was all really confusing. Anyway, when you and I got together, Tim, we were sort of trying to work it out. It was like, 5 minutes before we went to go live because I sort of told you the story.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we're sort of thinking that, someone's made a mistake, like a retailer has gotten 2 packages and they've accidentally sent you, in one of the orders, they've physically taken the wrong thing and sent it to you. That was sort of our thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And that, the support team should just remedy that problem by sending you the right item. But then we discovered that there are 2 very similar retail websites that Reolink operates. They have the Reolink website, which is reolink.com/au. So that's like the Australian Reolink official website, which has all the products, and you can also buy it from their store. But then there's also reolinks.com.au, which has an S on the end, but they're listed as an official retail partner of Reolink. So it's not like a dodgy scam website or anything. It's like another retailer that sells all the same stuff.
Yeah, they're official like retailer partner. So yeah, to make it clear, everything I purchased was from Reolink in some sort of official capacity. And the first kit I bought, the really good, impressive kit, was actually through the official partner, so Reolinks. So I created an account with them, and where I was getting really confused was because I bought them a few weeks apart and I'm like not studying their websites. I just know I bought them from Reolink official, was that the emails were slightly different. Like the order numbers were a bit weird. In like the first 2 order numbers sort of made sense. And the third order number was like a variation. I was like, I don't know, like it's been 2 weeks. Maybe they've changed the way that works or something like that. So
the name of the websites is very similar.
Yeah.
Like it's not like you bought, like one of the stores was called like Home Security Guru or something and you'd bought it from there.
Yeah.
You'd bought one from Reolink and one from Reolinks.
Yeah.
So I mean,
the key thing to focus on is that both products were advertised to be the exact same kit with the exact same name. So they were both RLK16 820 D8A. They were both that exact same name, but they were 2 in very different products.
Yeah, and I think on the websites, if you dug into some of the product images, there were like, it's not like they were showing the same images for one kit and then they're just sending you something else. If you did scroll all the way down and sort of looked at like their gallery of things that you get, they did show the camera differences. But if you were just rebuying the exact same product, and so you copied the product code into Google and just went, click on that, and then, the first images that come up aren't like a nice little picture of everything that you get. They're all just like generic security sort of things. You're probably not going to do too much looking into the exact items that come in because you've Googled the exact same product code. And so you'd be expecting to get the exact same product. And it's not like a name that they're sort of using that's got different sub product codes. You were typing in the exact product code, which is the letters and numbers salad that you said before. So just unacceptable sort of stuff.
So the inferior kit comes with the RLN16410 NVR box, and the good kit came with the NVS16. So they've got like a cheap reseller knockoff of each kit, but in this instance, the reseller had the higher quality kit under the same name. So basically what has happened is they've messed up the naming. They weren't meant to have the same name, but they screwed that up. But they tried to like just make it my problem. And their support is absolutely garbage, like terrible user support. It's just almost non-existent, or it really is non-existent. And their solution was just to refund me and make me have to pay shipping on a security kit twice. and not get anything in return. That was their solution. They thought that was a perfectly adequate solution to the problem. So just a terrible experience there. And even when I bought the motorized 18 times optical zoom camera that I forget the model name of now, I ordered 2 of them and paid for 2. And this was on the Rio Links website. And the sales team contacted me and said, "Oh, we only have 1 in stock. So would you like to cancel the order or just get refunded for 1 and get 1?" I said, "Well, ideally I do want 2. If you've only got 1 in stock, that's fine. Refund me for the other one. But like, I want 2 of these cameras. So is it going to come back in stock?" Just a little bit of it. I said to them, like, a little bit of extra information would be appreciated. Is it being replaced with a newer model or what's happening? They refunded me the money, never got it. It was just crickets. No after sales or additional sales support there. No, they couldn't even tell me. Like, they couldn't just reply saying, "We're sorry, yeah, this has been discontinued. No new product's been announced at this point in time," or nothing like that. Just never got a reply. So it's a shame, because my experience with the Rio Links products, at least the good ones, have been good. The additional cameras I bought have been excellent. I've been using them for a few months now. As I said, not a single problem. They work way better than other products I've used in a similar price. In fact, they're cheaper than the Swan ones. So yeah, great product, just terrible customer service, and they obviously screwed up by naming 2 products, with 2 different products with the same name. That almost certainly wasn't meant to be the case. It was just an error on their behalf. But I have no idea how many people bought those kits in that period of time and got variations of the good one or the bad one under the same name. Now, they weren't the same price, so I guess there's that. But one of them was advertised to be on sale. So yeah. So that's pretty crap. I did end up reporting them, and I told Rio Links I was going to do this. I reported them to the ACCC, filled out all their online stuff and did that. And the funny conclusion to all of this is, when I told them I wasn't happy with that, and that's not going to do it for me, and that this is anti-consumer and I will be reporting them to the governing body, they just ceased all communication with me. They did no follow-up, nothing, didn't answer any other questions. They just basically iced me out. And they then went to their website and renamed the kit correctly. So it's quite funny, because in a DM history, I spelled it out for them. I showed them exactly the problem and what they'd done wrong on their websites. And those links still show the RLK 16, the embedded links show the original kit. But now when you click on them, they go to a different product. Like, they've changed all and fixed the problem. But they didn't want to address the mistake with me, a paying customer that's bought multiple thousands of dollars worth of things from them. They just quietly changed it on the website, dusted their hands off, and moved on. So pretty shit company, Rio Links. I won't be buying anything else from them, so I'll be looking at replacing those systems with something else and chucking those ones in the bin. Or I probably could potentially get them refunded if I can ever get onto their support or sales again. But I think I'd rather just tell people not to use Rio Link. They're a crap company. It could be a situation where, just dealing with the wrong people. We've had that with other companies we've dealt with in the past, but really it's on them to hire competent people that can do their job and look after their customers. And Rio Link has failed epically. So yeah, it was so bad. I was tempted to make a video on it on the Hardware Unboxed channel, but it's just a massive disconnect from what we normally do. But not out of the question, because there's a lot more information, facts and figures I could give you guys, just that, we don't want to talk about this for 2 hours on the podcast.
Yeah, the nice read of the situation is someone made a mistake and there was 2 products with the same product code that were listed at their 2 different but very similarly named retailers. The more nefarious reading of it is they originally sold the good quality kit under that name and then quietly updated the kit to be worse and were selling that under the exact same product code, which meant that people who were buying a newer version on the official store, not the reseller store, but the official store, had this downgraded version. I'm not sure whether they were doing that because why would they bother? But companies have done that.
Yeah, they seem to be selling both of them simultaneously for at least when I was monitoring it, like over a month. So there's at least 4 or 5 weeks there where you could buy both kits under the same name from either website, and you would get the different products. So it wasn't like they transitioned from one to the other. It seemed to be something they were doing simultaneously. I think it was just an oversight. But yeah, they weren't willing to make it good. So, yeah. And I mean, the fact that I just never got, I emailed their support, their official support email. I filled out the form on their website, and to this day, I've never got a response. And it was really weird as well, because when I was talking with the social media team on X via DM, they said, "Oh, we've got this all sorted. Rio Link support has sent you an email." So I go to my email. There's nothing there. Okay. I checked my junk, nothing there. I reply to them, "I haven't got the email." "Have you checked your junk?" "Yeah, I have. It's not there." Okay. Half an hour later, they've sent you another email. Go there, nothing there. This process repeats another 6 or so times. Absolutely insane. They can't get me an email. And I'm like, well, maybe there's some sort of email compatibility server-side issue. I don't know what's going on. Here's a different email address hosted on a completely different server to the original one. It is in no way related. Couldn't get the email there either. So 2 different email addresses, 2 different email clients. I was like, I was logging onto the server to try and find this Rio Link email, and it just wasn't there. So the social media team couldn't even get their support team to send me an email. But I know the support email works, because when I purchase things through them, I'll get a notification. Like I've got all of the relevant like automated emails, but their support team couldn't reach me for some reason. And again, to this day, I still haven't got a personalized email from Rio Link addressing the issue. But I've had a video conference call with their social media team. That was interesting. The original RLK 16 820 D8A kit, that's actually the cheap kit. So if you go to riolink.com /au, that's the kit you get. The first kit that I bought, they've now renamed. So the official partner, riolinks.com.au, the RLK16, so on and so forth, that's been renamed to the NVS16 8MD8, which essentially is the NVR box model number. So the more expensive kit had the wrong name based on that.
Interesting.
So yeah, basically what they should have done is said, "No worries, send back the kit once we get it and confirm we've received it from you. We'll send you out an NVS 16, because that's what you were led to believe you were purchasing, and you've already purchased one of those." So realistically, they should do that anyway. It's a good faith thing at the very least, because it's a returning customer trying to buy the product that they've now renamed. So
that's what I would have thought they should do, but yeah, obviously they've decided not to.
Yeah.
But that's fine. They get blasted on the Hardware Unbox podcast, so whatever. Their loss.
Yep. Which, and adding to the confusion, on the riolinks.com.au product page for the NVS 16, they have, when you scroll down to the bottom, "Stay strong, stay weatherproof." They've got the new cheap camera there, the P335. But if you go down to what's in the box, they have the P334. So they're even messing up the images of the actual products you're getting on the product page. So it's just sloppy, really, which is, again, really disappointing, because the actual products themselves are very good and the software's very good. Yeah, they haven't been able to get it all together.
Right. Well, I think that does it for this week's Hardware Unbox podcast. Thanks to everyone that's listened to the end. If you do want to support our podcast and all of our various channels, we do have Patreon. For the podcast, you do get the ad-free supporter feed if you sign up and access the feed through there. But also we've got all sorts of other benefits, like our Discord chat, monthly live streams, BTS sort of content. So plenty of reasons to be a Patreon member. Hopefully we'll be back next week with another podcast talking about all the latest news topics. Maybe we'll bring Microsoft back in to blast them again for something dumb that they've done. But that will require more Microsoft news. So we'll wait and see on that one. Anyway, thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.